and welcome to Hopefield Sessions, where we have conversations on life and well-being that enable you to thrive. My name is Jodine and I'm one of the Associate Pastors of Guyamere Baptist Church, and this resource is made in partnership with the team at Hopefield to support our faith community. And today we're talking about stronger families and some of the building blocks to managing change and the challenges in the midst of a global pandemic. Joining me for the session today is Robert Boardman, who is the Clinical Director for Hopefield and a practicing psychologist who has worked in the field for 25 years. And also Linda Salem, who's a clinical psychologist who focuses on working with children and families with over 30 years experience. Thank you both so much for joining me today. Linda, I want to start with you. Now that restrictions are easing on our movements and so forth, what have you been looking forward to doing?
Well, it's actually what I'm not going to be doing. I'm going to be doing less. I think that's what I'm looking forward to, is looking back over these last few months and what's, on reflection, what's really mattered, and trying to hold on to that, which actually means doing less and being more. And I think that will come out a little bit more as we talk today about why I've arrived at that.
I love that. What are you going to do? Less. I love that. That's great. And Rob, what about you? What are you looking forward to as restrictions ease?
I think for me, like our family has been, we're an active family, so we've been out mountain biking and doing all our normal stuff. So in some respects, that's not really changing. To be honest, I'm just looking forward to going to the movies.
Yeah.
I just want to hang out, and if you've got somewhere to go, like now we can sort of go out to places. So I caught up with a mate the other day. We were able to go out somewhere and just hang out for a few hours. So that's starting to happen. So I like that. But yeah, I just want to be able to get away, have a night off and just chill. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Simple,
all those
but
things.
it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, today we're talking about stronger families. And Linda, I wanted to ask you, why is this an important area for us to explore?
Basically, I think from what my observations are over the last couple of months, I actually do believe that families have drawn together closer and forced, but there have been quite a good number of good things that have come out of that. And of course, some challenges, of course, for the families being cooped up together. But I feel that we should continue to build on what we've learnt within families, and that's sort of a lot of the conversations I'm having with families at the moment is what you want to keep about this time and what would you like to discard, and it's all about becoming stronger really at this time. So, and we can always be stronger. It's always keeping that open mindset, I suppose, that we've still got a lot of growing to do, and I think we can take a lot of, we can learn a lot from these last few months going into the future, and that's what I'd like to, I'm sort of spending my time thinking about and also talking with families about.
I think it's an issue that's relevant for all of us. Sometimes when we think families, we think kids, primary school sort of kids and families, but as we're seeing across the lifespan, we're seeing families are so much broader than just that kind of, my kids are in school, that's our family. And so I think it's actually something that we're really wanting to explore with the people that we're seeing around how do I make my connections better within my family, because there is something special about someone that you've known for a long time, someone that you're open and you're vulnerable with, and you're able to have that robustness, but we still love each other. And so there is something really quite unique about the family system.
And it is interesting because we focus, you think about home loans or houses and cars and all the material things, but it's our relational things that we'll be taking through our whole life with us. So it is important to spend time on it.
Yeah, it is. And I think especially at this time where we were really stripped back to basics, and actually the basics built connection much more strongly, and I think that's part of the message today is with, I'm thinking if it's all going a bit awry, then let's get back to basics, because it's the basics that actually build the foundations or rebuild the foundations.
Yeah, yeah. So if we are aiming for healthy families or healthier families to become stronger, what are some of those basics that we can engage or embrace with?
Yeah, well, spending time with your loved ones, and it's not necessarily structured time in the sense that you're trying to teach someone something or solve a problem. It's just being with that person.
Quality time.
Being present kind of thing, not just being distracted when I'm with them. It's actually being
sitting on your phone and scrolling.
Yeah, that's right. And it's easy to do. If there's a lull, we both go on our phones.
Yeah.
But I guess what we're looking for, some of the basics are the respecting the person that's in front of you, whether they're 3 years old or whether they're, 49. It's actually being with that person. That's one of the key things. Noticing who's with you, not just noticing what I'm going to say next or not listening to that interaction. And to be honest, it is a skill that you can both develop, but typically what we're finding in our work is often people need to be reminded of those basics. We know that it makes sense to listen and interact. We know that it makes sense to be respectful. We know that certain actions require consequences. But sometimes we're either tired or we're coming out of COVID where we feel like a couple of different areas in our life have been turned upside down. And so we're looking to change that. And so I'm interested, Linda, if I've got a young family, if I've got small kids, what are some of the basics that are going to help our family function? What are some of those foundations?
Well, I think one of the very basic building blocks in relationship is basically attention. And how you, as a parent, you give that attention to your young one. Children thrive on attention, whether it's negative attention or positive attention. Stephen Biddulph framed it beautifully in one of his books, The Secrets of Happy Children. He said, when sometimes children have that Mona Lisa smile, you don't know how to read it, but what it actually is I don't really like this, but it's better than no attention at all. And I've always, that's just a very strong picture in my view, that children love attention. And if they're misbehaving or having challenges that are really throwing parents for a loop, often the parents are giving more attention, of course, to that misbehaviour, and the balance of attention becomes very quickly it's unbalanced.
Yeah, right.
And so I feel that one of the basic building blocks is basically how to give attention to your children and making conscious decisions about what to ignore and when to ignore it, as opposed to giving attention to absolutely everything, and particularly negative behaviours.
And would you say it's like you want to aim for constructive and calm attention? Because I know there's attention that's like, you kids, better calm down, and you can be hairs on end because of how the kids are behaving. That's one type of attention. It's not necessarily, it is constructive in some sense, but I think it's a building block.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there, because sometimes the way we give attention to children, it's we're actually owning the issue. So we get really riled up, and we've got to make sure that this doesn't happen again. We've got to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Whereas I think children, particularly I think toddlers, they can work some of this out.
Yeah.
Depending on how much we attribute our response and our reactions, that we're responsible for their tantrum or their difficulty if they didn't get something they wanted at that time. We're responsible, as opposed to letting the child work it out, basically based on, your stance. If you take a calm stance, a contemplative stance, and think, well, really, I think you can do this. I'm just going to wait for you to work it out within some guidelines. I think that is a much more, it teaches your children to be aware of themselves and how they affect others. But if we're constantly reacting and trying to take it away from them.
So how do I be more purposeful though? Like if I'm a parent and I know, okay, I'm going to try this amazing person, Linda said, I've got to be calm, I've got to do those kind of things. How do I get that happening in my life? What's the process? Do I say to myself, I'm going to do it more this week? Do I say to myself, what's the process of being purposeful?
Well, I think it's never too late to start at any point.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so you've got to really think as a parent it's never too late. And every day is a new day.
Yeah.
Okay? So when you decide, okay, I think I'm overreacting, I'm thinking I'm underselling my child, I think, when you've come to that point, just start. And that's start afresh. So the next day you've made this decision, I am not going to overreact. I'm going to allow my child to own the issue. I'm going to allow them to explore their possibilities. I'm going to allow them to make mistakes, because we were talking about that earlier.
Yeah, so we might talk a little bit more of that once we look beyond children to adolescence.
You make that decision daily and you don't basically give up on it. So you might have a bad day. Tomorrow's a fresh day. The aim is to basically start somewhere and be consistent for at least 6 to 8 weeks.
Yep.
That's my rule of thumb. If you're going to develop a new habit or a new way of responding, give yourself 6 to 8 weeks.
Short-term pain for that long-term gain.
Yeah. Give yourself time.
Yeah.
And expect the change from within yourself before your child. You may get some changes very quickly with your child, but I think you have to be patient with yourself.
You're right.
And basically make that goal for yourself. So that's where I think you should start, is a decision, and view yourself every day is a new day and a fresh start.
Yeah. I'm wondering if getting support for yourself, not like professional, but just whether it's talking to a partner or if you're talking to the other mums, that kind of thing, actually sharing that burden of it all. Because sometimes I might say to myself, yep, I'm going to do this, and I failed again, kind of thing. Like you almost want other people to speak into it. Yeah, I know you're brilliant at this, and it encourages you. Or we parent as a team, those kind of things. Because it's tricky, isn't it?
That's important, Rob, because I think accountability helps.
Yep.
And so if we allow ourselves to be vulnerable to somebody else, if you don't have a partner, we have a lot of single parented families out there. There is perhaps someone else you can talk to that can that you would allow yourself to be vulnerable to, and say, look, hold me to account. Help me with this.
Yeah.
Because help me break this pattern.
And I think there's a difference between positive support and negative. Sometimes it's a little bit easy where everyone gets around and says, oh, my kids drive me nuts. You need to almost have that person that says, how can we do something differently? As opposed to us getting around and saying, yeah, that's too hard. Let's quickly, while the kids are away, let's have some fun. You need those friends around you that actually say, yeah, let's make some changes, and they believe change is possible.
Yes. Yeah, basically. And change is possible. I was only just talking to a family today and just saying, look, it's not set in cement, the challenges that you have with your child. Children are very malleable and resilient. Try and see your child as, from that point of view, they're not stuck in their ways, especially little children, preschoolers going into early primary school. Yes, habits and form very quickly, but I think there's many, like those early years, you've just got an open platform to help them adjust, but it really has to start, I think, with the adult involved.
It's so interesting you say that, because I think in you as the adult or the parent or the caregiver asking for help, you're starting to model what it feels like to be vulnerable. You're like literally putting yourself in the kid's position. And I've been reading about how often the go-to kind of response to children if they're, upset, is to verbally tell them to calm down. And a lot of these younger children are obviously not verbally coherent, or you're not modelling it, because often we're like, you need to calm down. It's like, can you show me how to do that? Because I'm only a young, small human on this planet.
Yeah, no, actually, they're very unlikely to take any
verbal cues.
Anything in. Yeah. But except if you are bigger than life, they certainly see that.
Yeah.
So, when they're upset and tantruming and it's really distressing. Yeah. They're really distressed, and it's not the time to actually try and manage them with words.
Started a United Nations negotiation process,
Yeah, it's so tempting.
Yeah.
I mean, I've fallen into that trap so many times in my roles, even on camps with kids that are really having a really difficult time, and you want them to, you're just tempted to just draw them out of it, but you've really got to learn restraint and confidence in that child that this too shall pass if we leave it be. and it will pass. And that's when it's passed. That's when they're calm. Is the best time to talk it through. Really,
and an interesting sort of principle or value, almost a lifestyle we're trying to develop in our kids is the concept of self-soothing, which basically means, and they'll carry that through adulthood. So when I get upset, I'm able to calm myself down. If I need it externally, then I'm going to look for it externally, and then I'm going to look for it in my partner when I'm 20 and 30 and 40 and 90. And so letting them experience some of that distress, there's not necessarily something wrong with that, but also guiding them to the how do I calm myself down? So mum or dad or the dog is not always the person that calms them down.
How do kids do that, Rob? How can they learn to self-soothe? And maybe how do kids learn if the parents don't know how to self-soothe?
Well, I think Linda was touching on it a little bit before. And whenever you learn a skill, you have to learn it when you're calm, not when you're stressed. And so you can't just say, okay, breathe now, or maybe that one is one that you can do. But you need to learn these skills when we're not stressed. So as a parent, you notice when your child's doing well. We've all heard that, but we just forget to do it sometimes. So, oh, wow, I noticed that you were upset with your brother and you're able just to take yourself out of that situation and calm yourself down again. That's amazing. And so we label, we name, we acknowledge the good things.
That's where the attention should be going. You know, if you're going to correct that imbalance.
Yep.
Whereas you'd be tempted to focus all your attention on the sibling fights or whatever. But when the young people are actually getting on, we breathe a sigh of relief and we say,
that's right.
Our work is done, and we'll sit back and have a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
But that's the time. If you want to change anything, that's the time you need to speak into their life. Sorry for interrupting.
That's good. Yeah, I
that's
agree
relating
with you.
to the attentional focus.
Yeah.
But teaching the skill of self-soothe is best when a child's calm. And yes, secondly, if you model it yourself. So I've had parents say to me, and they say it in front of their children, and I think it's very good to say, well, when I'm getting angry, when I'm feeling angry, I'll tend to take myself into my room and I'll think or pray or...
I'll go for a walk, I'll put on some music, I'll do an activity
As long as they don't storm out of the house that way, that's not... But we talk about that and how to model it to your children. They can actually take themselves into their rooms and calm down. And a lot of families I talk to, children have that that strategy. And they actually take themselves out and then they come back.
And so if they don't have that strategy, learning how to self-soothe, it could be asking them when they're calm, when you get upset, what things help you? And we're going to prompt them around some of the physical things because as we talked about, the verbal stuff can't really work. Do you find it nice when you get under your blanket, or do you find it nice when you're stroking your dog, or do you need to be outside in the air? Is it, if they're a little bit older, is it helpful to go and have a shower? That kind of thing. So we're actually educating them on what works for them. I think there's the modelling part, but there's also an awareness that we have to raise in them. And so then when it happens, how do you feel after your shower? Oh, I just noticed that we were just hanging out and you just spent some time reading. You look pretty relaxed. And so we're naming what we see. Now, this is the theory. Obviously, it doesn't happen all the time, but this is the goal. This is what we want to have as our long-term kind of practice. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense, but it's not... What I suppose I'm just wanting to clarify that it's theory, but in practice, it works very, very well when you practice it.
Yes.
And you've got to give it more than one shot. You've got to, as I said before, you've got to keep working at it.
Yeah.
For at least, if you're changing something, for at least 6 to 8 weeks. And in my experience, families hit the mark well before that.
Yeah, that's true.
If they, adopt it and say, this is what we're doing from now. And they're going with it. And I think, it doesn't always bring about the self-soothing that you'd like, but probably 80% of the time it does. And we're not asking for perfection. We're not getting 100% guarantee, but, 80% is better than 30%, which is what most families, when they want to talk to you about the difficulties is when they're at that 30% mark, like 3 out of 10 times they're not having any success.
Yeah.
And before we move on, there's one other thing that I think is important in this mix is actually helping the child to be balanced and have other interests that are good in their life. Like, yes, we need to manage when things are tough, but we also need to make sure there's good things that build into their life. So they're actually going, okay, so I've got the energy, I've got the momentum, I've got the belief, I've got the joy in my life that allows me to go through some struggles. And we know maybe as adults, when we're not going so well, we're finding things hard for an extended period, our capacity to function is just lowered. So you could tell me all the things that would help me, but I'm just going to find that hard to do. And so with our children, we need to make sure that they do have good things in their life. And that has to be purposeful too. And we need to be mindful coming out of COVID. It's about the relationships. It's about reconnecting. It's about having play dates. My child now has just started, FaceTiming his besties in year 5 all the time. And I think it's brilliant because they can't connect as much, but now they're feeling slightly connected. And so, we have to do things differently, but we have to make sure they're going okay as well as building these protective factors, these skills.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Robert, how does it look for maybe teenagers or kids that are older? Obviously, how you approach maybe a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old is going to look different for someone who's 10 upwards.
Yeah, there is a bit of a difference, but the fundamentals there, and I think Linda was getting to the point that I need to be connected to my child, I need to be present with my child in order to have influence. And those teenage years are actually... the opportunities to be present, sometimes you almost have to be a little bit creative. Whether they come home and they go straight to their room or whether they're hanging with their friends. How was your day here? It was fine.
Yeah,
that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It could be very easy to almost feel like my home is a hotel. And I've got no doubt there might be people out there watching that. And my kid just comes and goes and I do the washing and they grunt at me during dinner and every once in a while we'll have a fight to say, clean your room. But I don't think that's the breadth of the experience that we're looking for. If we're connected to our kids, we have more of an influence in their life. And so if we get into this pattern where there's consequences for action X, Y, and Z, get off your Xbox or, show respect to person. We need to be connected to them before we can discipline them. Yeah. And we were just talking, Robert and Linda, before about how sometimes, like if you're a mum out there and you've got a 15-year-old boy, you're not into the same things that they are, more than likely. You're not into gaming or skateboarding or scootering or whatever it is they're into. And so then we need to look for opportunities to actually spend time together. And so, for example, it could be, I'm going to nip up the shops. Can you come and give me a hand because I'm going to have a few shopping bags? It could be, I have no idea how to figure this program. How on earth do I uninstall this and reinstall it? So we employ them as the experts. It could be, hey, knowing what their YouTubers are. How are you going with, I don't know what my kids are, Jelly or Dan TDM or all that kind of stuff. Those kind of things. Having said all of that, though, modelling, being present, and making sure they're in an okay place are the foundations for stronger families. We start to tend to notice that there's a little bit more of a difference in, I don't know, I guess we'd almost call it, would you call it self-centered? How would you describe that difference when I start to individuate? Sometimes we might think of it as selfish, but do you want to tell me a little bit about that?
In the teenage years?
Yeah, sort of in both, as we sort of transition through that developmental process.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. It once was said that, that early adolescence, which is, 12, 13, 14, which might be a little bit younger now, is a lot like toddler period, meaning the emotionality, the egocentricity, which means really children really don't see themselves separate from the world. Yeah. And so when anything changes in their world, it's like it's affecting them, like you've cut off their leg. And so it's an immediate survival reaction. And they sort of grow out of that, which is a normal developmental path until their brain develops more. But for some reason, when they hit adolescence and the hormones run wild, we return to this egocentricity. But at the same time, they have a lot more cognitive capacity. So they might emotionally be reactive like a 4-year-old, but thinking-wise, they actually do have a lot more they have a lot more control over what they're thinking and a lot more awareness that's driving or contributing to the emotions. And so it becomes more, less egocentric, but more about me, which we have, we refer to as self-centered, where it gets into selfishness, whereas it's all about me. And so self-centered can be normal for that, but when it becomes selfishness, where they won't actually do anything for anyone else, or the young, they're just, all their gratification comes from how it affects
meeting
their own needs. I think that's the tricky period. And this is where, if we've built some basics all along in terms of being part of a community, part of family, part of a wider group, say church, for example, that you can, if you've got those basics in there, they haven't gone away, they've just disappeared in the emotion, you want to basically try and slowly work that back into their thinking, and perhaps encouraging them to be involved with doing something for someone else. So it might be just getting involved with your grandparents again, or contributing to some project that's happening, and
or the way the household runs, or there's certain activities at school they might get involved
I mean,
with.
schools do a great job of this.
They do, definitely.
And a lot of young people they do a great job of encouraging charitable attitudes and contributing, building gardens, all sorts of things, And but I find for some families it doesn't translate in the home, or it doesn't start from the home and translate outwards. So I always, talk with families about what's your child involved with at school. If they don't know, then one of their first jobs is to find out. If the young person isn't in the room with me. But if the young person's in the room with me, I'll often talk to them about what they're involved in, what projects there are that's happening at school that they're doing for others, and focusing on the other and what's in it, what's happening for the other, and their contribution, and it's just getting that juice going again, and building on that.
Starting to prompt them to look beyond themselves, because ultimately we're trying to build them into independent, responsible people. I mean, that's what parenthood does, but that's, in a sense, until they can take that journey on for themselves. And part of that process, and I think I worked with teenagers for like 15 years on a youth homelessness program. I love the teenage years because you get the best of both worlds. You get to be a child and you don't even have to worry about where the next sandwich is coming from, but you get to be an adult as well, because we spend the next 70 years being an adult with all of our responsibilities. And so those teenage years can actually be brilliant. But as parents, we can find that frustrating. And so what we're really looking to do to build our stronger families is be connected, be consistent. I always think it makes sense if there's going to be a consequence to something, your child should know the consequence before they commit the act. Because I think sometimes it's a bit unfair. Well, you do that, no tech for a week. Well, if I know it's going to be no tech for a week, I wouldn't have done it. And we're walking that fine line between having them be responsible for their actions and then also making sure that they become someone that we're proud of. And it's a tricky thing, and it's an interactive thing, and there will be times when it works better than other times. But it's really something that we want. The reason why we have the consequences is so they stop and they think about their actions. If you're a part of our GBC family, we're going through Hebrews, and we're about to do Hebrews chapter 12, and it's talking about discipline. And, God loves those he disciplines. A father loves. There's a verse that says, we were all disciplined as kids and we love our parents for it. So there's a place where discipline is important, but it starts to when it crosses over into punishment, and by punishment I mean it's just doing it because there's no actually end in sight, there's no reason for it, that's no longer healthy. Discipline, 100% important, because we need to keep our kids, to let them know the boundaries, what's acceptable and what's not.
So really what you're saying, Rob, is reminding us that that relationship and that connection at a shared experience that you may need to go back to, and that's what I'm saying, when you're in strife or when you're thinking about the challenges, check yourself. What have you lost, or what ground have you lost? What basics have been missing? You know, and take the time to go back to that. So connect, relationship, shared activities, and with your teenagers, and then building that mutual respect, but still within boundaries. Within, there are limits, so they need to understand making choices within certain limits, and you'll still get your upheavals, and that's sometimes they appear like they're tantrums, but again, allowing them to own that and not shift the goalpost too quickly. But if you can tick the box or just check yourself and think you've got some relationship with your young person, then that's 50% of the battle. And you've just got to help them ride the storm, and you've got to help each other ride that through. Yeah.
It's interesting what you said, Rob. I guess parenting can feel like a bit of a marathon, but the aim is to get these young people to become, I guess, self-sustaining adults. And that's a really beautiful thing. And you literally have the chance to walk them through all the different facets of life, whether that's how you look after yourself, how you cook food, how you organise yourself, how you speak to each other. And that's modelled beautifully daily in your family.
I think one of the challenges comes is, and it's like this with most things in life, when our expectations are one thing and the reality is another. And we might expect that our kids are going to be perfect and they'll always look after their brothers or sisters, or they might listen to us. And sometimes that'll happen and sometimes it won't. We find that those families that tend to have more of a health to the way they interact, a robustness, are those that are flexible. We can manage, here comes a situation, whether it's COVID on a global scale, or whether it's just our families are going to move, or whether, whatever the specific instance is. Those families that have that flexibility actually allow them to manage the tasks that are challenging in front of them. So flexibility effectively means that I'm going to look at the situation almost with fresh eyes. Linda talks about being present, but then it also means that I actually employ all of my resources to address this. I don't forget what I've learned from the past, and I'm open to new things. And so flexibility, when I've got a teenager, means, well, in the past, I just threw them in their room when they were being naughty and then they came out half an hour later. I can't really do that for teenagers. I need to be growing and expanding my repertoire. And so how do we do that? We listen to Linda, we read books, we talk to our friends, we pray about it, we seek guidance from those that are informed. We talk to people that have been there before. And I think that's where one of our values at GBC is that concept of having an intergenerational community. And because we tend to be individualistic, I think we miss a little bit of that intergenerational. And what typically happens now is let's call them the parents have ways that they want their children to be, and the grandparents might have a different way, and that can often be a cause of conflict. We're going to do it differently to the way when I was young, we're going to do it this way, and the grandparents want to do it that way. And so part of that is just actually talking about the process. I know that was brilliant for you guys, but we've got this different way that we want to do things. And it could be flexible. Okay, when they're at grandma's, yep, they can eat chocolate. When they're at home, no, we don't eat chocolate. When they're at grandma's, they might do X, Y, and Z. And so the flexibility we find is really important. And it's not just a value for families. It helps me as a healthy person manage what stressors that I've got coming up in my life.
And that's interesting you say conflict, because conflict is one of the great facilitators of connection, surprisingly, because we actually have to be, I guess, honest about how we stand, how we feel, and how do we communicate and understand each other's kind of worldview or perspective.
And we're no longer putting the pretense up. There's this is who I am, or this is my value, or this is my belief. Typically what we find in a lot of families, or maybe couple work, is it's very difficult to have a productive sort of conflict around values. values are very difficult to address and change and solve. Some of the key rules I've got as far as fighting fair is stick to the topic, be respectful, and don't bring up the past. So if you're working through something with your partner, if it's an action or a behaviour, we can, okay, this is what's going to happen next. If it's a value, it's very difficult to come to an agreement. And so sometimes people fight about things that in some respects are not solvable. I have to accept that Linda is like that. Linda has to accept that Robert is just a funny person.
There you go. Just in summary, any final thoughts for people that might be in these kind of positions, trying to work out how to have stronger families?
Well, we've had a pretty robust discussion. I hope others can take out the main points. But my main thoughts are: go back to basics, build your relationship, give your attention where it's likely to build a child up, and where it's going to bring a child down or grow them down, remove your attention. And
yeah, that's good.
And that's my final words on the matter, I think.
Yeah, and so whether your family consists of school-aged children or whether you're 56 and your parents are still, that's your part of your family, those things make sense. The only other thing I might add is, because we do believe that God is living and powerful, I think it's just sometimes you just need to say, God, fill me with grace. God, please give me patience.
Mercy, compassion.
Yeah, because it can't come from us. Yes, we can do these things, but sometimes we'll just get tired.
Yeah.
But we're not in this alone.
No.
And so I like doing this. I like parenting as a team. I like working as a team, whether it's, Linda sitting on the couch or whether it's teaming with God. I think when we share our burdens, it makes sense.
It's a great reminder.
Yeah, the church community is a brilliant place. And I think as we're trying to, I know we're wrapping up, but we've had these few months missing church. I'm sure there's been a lot of people who have just missed the connections.
Yeah.
And there's things we might have missed, whether it's corporate worship or those other things. But, just saying, I'll take your kids home after church. Those kind of ad hoc things that come up. And so coming back to the Stronger Families theme, I love the idea that Linda talks about being present, but I would probably also add look after yourself. There's this image that I often use. I don't know, if you spend 3 seconds with me, you would have heard it. When you get on a plane, here are the exits, put your own mask on before you can help someone else. And I think that's a really strong image for parenting. If I'm not doing well, then I'm going to be snappy. If I'm going okay, then I'm going to have that grace. So looking after yourself, getting away, going for a coffee with the girls or going for a bike ride or reading a newspaper, whatever people do, look after yourself is half of being a healthy parent.
Great.
I'm into that.
Oh, well, thank you so much both for your insights. And I think, as you said, in a time where we've been, I guess, restricted from connection, you really appreciate what it is, and now's the time to sow into stronger connections, not only with our families, but our friends and communities around us. Thanks for being part of our Hopefield sessions. And if you've found this content valuable, please share this session with your friends and family. We look forward to unpacking more topics with you in the future. And for further information, you can go to hopefield.org.au or connect with Hopefield's social media. And as you go out into your day, be on purpose to live well.